Well, to discuss those issues, I spoke to Planning Minister Matthew Guy at his Spring Street office. Minister, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Josie.
The property market is flat and people are struggling to sell their homes. Where is the evidence that you need to open up more land for development?
The government isn't expanding Melbourne's growth boundary and bringing forward new supply so that we can get that to market tomorrow. We are readying Melbourne for the next 5, 10 and 15 years. And this is what good planning policy is about. It is about planning your city in advance, not for the next 2 or 3 years, but for the next 20 years. That's what the government's doing.
You made a promise this week that those new suburbs you've announced will have crucial infrastructure from the start. How can Victorians have faith in that promise, given that there are existing suburbs that are still waiting for that crucial infrastructure, such as train stations?
Well, one of the suburbs I bought online is Manor Lakes, which is 1.7 kilometres from its nearest railway station. Two of them up in the northern suburbs of Melbourne are next door to existing railway stations. The government has changed the law for developer taxes, developer contributions, so that those taxes can now be used earlier to realise state infrastructure. It was a proposal opposed by the Labor Party. It beggars belief they opposed it, but the truth is we have changed the law. We are bringing forward that infrastructure through developer contributions earlier, and we have the evidence obviously there on the ground to do it.
Isn't that the point though that you just made, is that some of those suburbs are near existing train stations? Those existing train stations are already struggling to cope with demand.
And they need to be upgraded. And that's why the government has changed the law through the growth areas contribution to allow developer contributions to be used to pay for state asset upgrades.
But if you're living in Diggers Rest or if you're living in Werribee and you learn that there's going to be new suburbs planned in your municipality and you're already struggling to get a seat on the train, how can you reassure those people that their lives aren't going to become even worse?
Well, Werribee's a good example. The Manor Lakes structure plan that I've just brought forward is a suburb 1.7 kilometres from a brand new railway station on the regional rail link that the Baillieu government has committed hundreds of millions of dollars extra due to Labor's unfunded project. So we are bringing forward new carriages in the state budget, hundreds of millions of dollars for new carriages to operate on that line. We are investigating water transport for the southern part of that growth corridor. We are putting in place all the work that is necessary to ensure that we have good transport options. And on top of that, a lot of the land that I have brought forward in the urban growth boundary will be used for employment.
What about, for example, though, you mentioned Werribee and Manor Lakes, but what about Diggers Rest, for example, where it's just a V-line train and those V-line trains are already running at capacity?
Well, the Sunbury rail electrification will open within the next few months, and the Sunbury rail electrification will see Diggers Rest brought onto the Metropolitan Rail system. So the electrification is almost ready to open. We have a new suburb with the upgraded station there which people will be able to take to the city, so they'll be on the Metro network. So we have a mix of stations and a mix of some of those new suburbs which will be serviced by Interurban and some by the new urban trains.
What about Caroline Springs, where it still doesn't have a train station? It's smack bang in that area that you're now looking to bring in thousands more people.
And it's one of those areas where the government's change to the developer contributions law might actually see the realisation of a state asset, a railway station, earlier than would have been the case under the previous government. We've changed the law in relation to the timing of developer contributions payments and how they can be structured, and we believe that will have a good impact upon realising that development earlier.
Some developers stand to make a lot of money from this decision, and a report this week suggests that two big winners are also donors to the Liberal Party. Were you influenced by that?
Well, that's a stupid report. It's absolutely ridiculous.
In what way?
Because at the end of the day, the people who suggested that land for inclusion was the council. And then their recommendation was sent to the Growth Areas Authority. Then that recommendation was oversighted by an independent panel, which was oversighted by a probity auditor. You can't get more hoops to jump through for urban land inclusion anywhere in Australia.
But it's the perception though, isn't it? I mean...
Well, I don't deal in perceptions, Josie. I deal in reality. And the reality is that any suggestion that the government has looked after anyone who may be favourable to any side of politics is ridiculous, simply because of the number of steps that is now required to go through to get land included in the urban growth boundary, and it's the strictest in Australia.
As I said earlier, it does boil down to perception, because someone who's donated money to the Liberal Party has then benefited from a decision made by a Liberal minister. Wouldn't it be better for all concerned if developers couldn't make political donations.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if there's a suggestion that no one should ever be able to have contact with any politician ever again if they've had anything to do with a political party, it's ludicrous.
Wouldn't it protect your reputation?
Well,
though?
I'm not, as I said, the way I've protected the government's position on this issue is to put forward a 4-step process for anyone to go through, for any land to be considered in the urban growth boundary. The council, the Growth Areas Authority, an independent panel, a departmental assessment and a probity auditor on top of that 4-step process. That is the most transparent in Australia. Anyone to suggest otherwise is living on Mars.
There's been speculation that you're planning a move to the lower house, potentially to launch a leadership challenge. Can you rule out moving to the lower house?
Well, it's just what you've said. It's speculation. It's ridiculous. There is no by-election coming. There won't be a by-election coming. There is a redistribution which has to occur before any changes occur to pre-selections for either parties. And I think it's a silly suggestion for anyone to be putting to me.
So you're ruling it out categorically?
Well, I don't have any intention to move from where I am. I'm very, very privileged to be a member of the Victorian Parliament. I'm exceedingly privileged to be the first Liberal Upper House MP for the Northern Suburban region, and I'm now joined by another colleague in Craig Ondarchie, and I'm exceedingly privileged to be there, and I don't have any intention to move.
Have you discussed with anyone challenging Ted Baillieu? Have you, or would you ever secretly tape record a colleague?
I'm not going to get into that issue. It's obviously leading on to something else which is not for me to make any comment on, I don't believe.
But can you rule out ever secretly tape recording a colleague?
It's not something that I've done in the past.
Minister, thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure.